The ANA Round the World ticket has been on my travel bucket list for years. And finally, a couple months ago, I pulled off this once in a lifetime trip. I shared the whole adventure over on the Kara and Nate channel, but I know that a lot of people over there don't necessarily care about the nerdy details, so I kept how I booked it pretty surface level. But in this video, Brendan is going to help explain all the details and show you exactly how you can book this trip for yourself. It's worth watching because this is by far the best miles and points redemption that I have ever made. I got 13 cents worth of value out of each point that I redeemed, and I got to spend countless hours in business class. So now Brendan is going to explain exactly how you can book this ticket for yourself, and I'll jump in and fill in some of the details on this once in a lifetime trip.
Good morning from St. Martin with a little preview into an upcoming video. I did just want to let you know really quick that literally days before we were set to post this ANA video, they actually announced that they're getting rid of this whole round the world ticket thing. Now, it's not all bad news because this isn't going to take effect until June 24th. So if this has been on your redemption bucket list for a long time and you're watching this before June 24th of 2025, then you're still in luck and now's your chance. Also, just a quick reminder that one of our favorite travel credit cards just increased its welcome offer to 100,000 points when you spend $5,000 in the first 3 months. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check out the link down in the description. All right, let's head to the not so sunny studio and get into today's video.
All right, so if you missed Nate's awesome video about his experience with this round the world ticket, I definitely recommend that you check that out after this one. I'll link to it down in the description. But while Nate focused on the various business class experiences that he had on this trip, as you can imagine, booking an itinerary like this on a single ticket using miles and points is a bit complicated to say the least.
Route takes me from Munich to Tokyo, Tokyo to Singapore, Singapore to Bangkok, Bangkok to Taipei, Taipei back to Tokyo, Tokyo to Chicago, Chicago to Toronto, Washington DC to London, and then London finally back here to Munich.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover in this video. So first of all, what is the ANA Round the World ticket? Well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a bucket list mile and points sweet spot offered by ANA, which is a Japanese airline, that allows you to book the most incredible travel itineraries that you could possibly think of in premium cabins if you want to, for a fraction of the cost of booking these tickets individually or paying with cash. For example, Nate's chosen route, which surprisingly isn't nearly as complicated as you could get with this offer, would have cost about $20,000 if paid in cash, or if you book these tickets individually with points, it would have cost nearly 600,000 points. But by using this round the world ticket from ANA, he paid just $1,300 in taxes and fees and 145,000 points, which means that one sign-up bonus from a number of premium credit cards could be enough to earn you this incredible trip of a lifetime, which is pretty nuts. So link down in the description if you want to learn more about some of our favorite cards that can help you earn those ANA points. Okay, but before we get to how to do this, and spoiler alert, it's pretty complicated, you might be asking yourself at this point, why? Why in the world would you go through all of this booking complexity just to sit on an airplane for endless hours? Well, I have a few thoughts on that, but first let's hear it from the guy who was actually crazy enough to book this for himself.
So once you get into the world of miles and points, it kind of becomes a game to see what the maximum value you can get out of a point is. And there is no doubt that the ANA Round the World ticket is one of the best ways to get the max value out of a point. We measure this in cents per point, so how many cents worth of value are you getting out of each point? And on this ANA trip, I was able to get 13 cents per point, which is just insane. Even booking some first class tickets with points, you're doing good to get like 6, 7, 8 cents worth of value. So with this ANA Round the World trip, I was basically able to double the value that I've ever gotten out of a point. Being able to maximize my points and then the novelty of flying around the world is what put this ANA Round the World ticket on my bucket list. I think there are two types of people who should pay attention to the ANA Round the World ticket. The first person is the person who is really nerdy like me and just loves aviation. Like, you love to experience different airports, different airlines. This is such a good way to do that. And then the second type of person that I think should pay attention to the ANA Round the World ticket is the person who's looking to take an extended amount of time off to go travel the world and see a bunch of places, because this is one of, if not the best ways to get to multiple continents for the least amount of money. Because you can book the ANA Round the World ticket in economy as well, but it doesn't take much to just apply for a couple credit cards and then have enough points to book business class round the world tickets. So on my journey, I flew from Japan to Bangkok and then I left pretty quickly. But what you could do is fly from Japan to Bangkok in business class and then spend a month traveling around Southeast Asia on budget airlines or on buses, and then come back to Bangkok and then just continue that ticket to another continent. So using these business class flights as positioning flights could be an epic way to see the world and take out the long, miserable flights in economy.
So let's finally get into all of those nerdy mile and point details. First of all, there's a few important rules that you need to follow when booking this ticket, which are listed on ANA's landing page for this program. You can pause the video here if you want to read them word for word, but essentially you have to cross both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans once. You must travel either east to west or west to east, so no backtracking, at least for the most part. You're allowed up to 8 stopovers, with 3 being permitted in Europe and 4 being permitted within Japan, and you have to spend at least 10 days on your itinerary, which shouldn't be too difficult considering most spend weeks or months flying all the way around the world. And you're allowed up to a maximum of 12 total flight sections, including 4 ground transport sections between different airports. So there's a lot to unpack there already, and don't worry, we'll break down everything in more detail. But in terms of pricing, ANA has a distance-based award chart specifically for these round the world tickets. And obviously flying in business or first class is going to cost more points than an itinerary in economy. Again, you can pause the video here if you want to see specific point requirements for your distance, but in general, you should expect to fly somewhere around 25,000 miles if you're circumnavigating the entire globe, which in business class would cost you about 145,000 points, which is insane because if you wanted to fly to Europe round trip from the US in business class, it would probably cost about 145,000 points. So again, I say, if you can put the pieces together, this is an insane deal. One other scenario where this ticket might be useful is on a shorter trip where you're just trying to hit a few different cities in the Northern Hemisphere. But thanks to those rules, and specifically the open jaw options that we'll talk more about in a second, you could book something like Seattle to Tokyo in business class, for example, and then months later on an entirely separate business class flight for a different trip, you could book London to New York on a completely different trip for just 68,000 ANA miles total, which is also an incredible deal because had you booked those 2 flights separately, it would probably cost a lot more points. Okay, a few things worth noting before we circle back to some of those specific rules and details. First of all, like most award flights, economy availability is going to be much easier to find, especially if you're traveling with multiple people. So if you're looking to do this in business class, it is going to add a layer of complexity since availability will be more limited, and that's part of the reason why Nate traveled on this itinerary without Kara. Also, like Nate did on some of his itinerary, you can also have long, multi-month stopovers between segments of your ticket. And thanks to that ground transport rule, you could have open jaw segments as well, meaning you fly into one airport and fly out of another on your next segment. So fly into Lisbon, for example, explore Portugal and Spain for a few weeks before heading north towards Paris for the next segment on your ticket. Now, there's different opinions on how far in advance you should book something like this. Some say a year in advance, as soon as the award chart is available. Others say your best bet is to book it last minute, but since different Star Alliance partners release their award availability differently, 6 to 10 months in advance seems to be the sweet spot. And as you can imagine, the sky is really the limit here, and the name of the game is going to be flexibility and award availability. So let's talk about that next. The process of actually booking this round the world ticket, at least in theory, is pretty simple. Earn points on your American Express credit card or in your Marriott Bonvoy account, which you can also transfer to ANA, piece together your desired routes and find award availability for each segment, transfer those points that you earned to ANA, and then call ANA to book your round the world ticket for a fraction of the typical cost. Sounds pretty easy, but the tricky part is actually piecing together your desired routes and finding award availability. And while everyone's experience is gonna look a little bit different depending on how much mile and point experience you have, In general, you should expect to spend several days, if not a week or more, piecing this puzzle together. So just know that going into this. To start, I'd recommend using a tool like Flight Connections just to get a good idea for your different route options and where certain airports connect to. It's also a good idea from the start to make a note of backup routes or other airport options, because the chances of you getting your first route option for every single piece of your itinerary is super unlikely, especially in business or first class. In Nate's case, he started and ended in Munich, Germany, but you can start and finish your round the world ticket in pretty much any city around the world, assuming there is some Star Alliance flight out of there, since ANA is a Star Alliance partner, and this entire thing is going to involve flying on Star Alliance partners. Star Alliance includes these airlines. Again, you can pause the video here if you want to read through the full list. Now, there's also a lot of heated debate online on which direction you should fly. Some people say that availability is better if you fly to the east. Others argue that jet lag is easier to beat if you're flying to the west. I personally think every person and itinerary is going to be a little bit different, but it is worth considering both directions, since this can significantly change the taxes and fees that you're charged. And as you're putting these pieces together, don't be afraid to think outside the box. Remember, you get 8 stopovers split between Europe and Japan, and 4 ground transportation sections, which you definitely want to use to your advantage. Just to give you an example, if one of your flights flies into London, well, I definitely recommend you try not to fly out of London, because the taxes and fees are going to be insane. So in this example, you honestly might be better off separately booking a cheap flight to Amsterdam or Paris and continuing your round the world itinerary from there. That's just one of many possible examples, but my point is, keep those rules that we covered in the back of your mind, and if you run into a roadblock as you're putting the pieces together, don't just scrap the whole thing and start over. You do have some tools in your toolkit. Now, generally the hardest segment to find is going to be your flight across the Pacific, followed by your flight across the Atlantic. But if you really get into a pinch, then what you could do is book those segments in economy with the hopes of being able to upgrade to business class last minute. And with something like ANA across the Pacific, that is fairly realistic. Your entire round the world ticket is still going to be priced in business class, and you do run the risk of being stuck in economy on this long flight. But this entire thing is going to be a game of compromise, so pick which areas you're going to compromise in. In terms of finding award space with Star Alliance partners, you can of course search on ANA's own website, and you might want to do that anyway before calling ANA to actually book, since sometimes partner airlines will end up showing you phantom award availability, but ANA requires you to search round trip itineraries, which can make this way more complicated than it needs to be. So my 2 go-tos would be partner programs like Aeroplan or United, since it lets you view award availability 1 month at a time. And in general, they're both just gonna be a lot more user-friendly than ANA's tool. You could also leverage tools like Daily Drop Pro to search for award availability across multiple programs at once. Just remember that you really need to be flexible on your dates here, so you might need to search a few different dates until you find what you're actually looking for. I really can't emphasize enough that this is going to be the time-consuming part of this whole process, and while I've never booked a round-the-world ticket myself, I did piece together an itinerary while researching this video, and even as a Mile and Points Pro, it still took me 2 solid days to put all the pieces together. So again, this is not for the faint of heart, but it will be worth it if you can pull it off. All right, so once you've picked out your desired route, you've found award availability for each segment of your ticket, ensuring that it meets all those criteria, like flying east to west or west to east. Again, for the most part, there are some exceptions, and it meets all of those stopover and ground transportation requirements. Then at that point, you're ready to call ANA to book your round-the-world ticket. In my experience, the ANA customer service is actually pretty decent, and while you should expect to wait on hold for quite a while before getting through, even if a certain segment isn't available, they're usually fairly helpful with finding alternatives, and again, that's why you should have some of those backup options ready, since it is very unlikely that you'll get your first pick. But the agent will also be able to confirm the total taxes and fees and help make any last-minute necessary tweaks, like dropping certain segments to help keep you within a certain bracket on that award chart. Speaking of which, you can and probably should use a tool like Crate Circle Mapper to get an estimate of your total flight distance and figure out how many points you'll need to transfer for your desired route. And once you've confirmed with the agent that each segment is available, it's time to transfer your points. And this is where you're gonna need a little bit of luck, because transferring points from American Express or Marriott Bonvoy to ANA can take up to 3 days. And I know that a lot of times it says it'll take 24 hours or more depending on the program, but then it ends up being an instant transfer. But I can confirm from my own experience that it actually does take a while to transfer points to ANA, and we all know that award availability can change very quickly. So say a prayer or wish on your lucky star, because while in some cases the ANA agent might be able to hold award seats for you depending on the airline, award availability can change pretty quickly, so just keep that in mind. I will mention though, if you know that this is something that you want to book at some point, then you might be better off just transferring those points in advance, knowing that you should be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together eventually. Just know that ANA does have some pretty strict rules when it comes to points expiring, with points generally expiring after about 36 months. So you won't want to transfer those points to ANA and then just sit on this idea for too long. Now, another option that I mentioned is transferring points from your Marriott Bonvoy account, which wouldn't be my first choice, but if you have a co-branded credit card with Marriott, then you can actually rack up those hotel points pretty quickly, and in that case, transferring them to book this round-the-world itinerary might be a great deal as well. But at this point, congratulations, because you just pieced together what is arguably the holy grail of the mile and points industry and are in for quite the trip of a lifetime. So my last burning question that I'd love for Nate to answer for all of us is, was it worth the effort to book an ANA round-the-world ticket?
I probably spent 40 hours planning this trip. So the question is, was it worth it? But I think that's a bit of an unfair question because I actually enjoyed the planning process. Like, I look at it as a puzzle, and it's a puzzle that results in you getting to fly around the world. And I just learned so much from the planning process, just about Star Alliance, the different routes that the airlines fly within Star Alliance, the different planes that are flown. And I had fun trying to optimize this trip for the best routes and to be on the best planes and the best seats. But even if it would have been a miserable 40 hours, I still think it's worth the investment because at 13 cents per point, you can sign up for a card that has a $95 annual fee. And then if you get 13 cents per point, 75,000 times 13 cents, you're getting almost $10,000 worth of value out of signing up for one credit card. And you're getting to fly around the world in business class. So without a doubt, the time that you're going to invest in figuring out your route, even if you don't enjoy it, is going to be well worth it.